Hey there, this is Dan. You're watching the Salty Sea, and we just had some wild previews at Nova Open, and let's get through them. I am so excited for everything we got. It was just, all killer, no filler. Every single piece of it amazed me, so I can't wait to get into it. Let's just go straight to the preview articles. So here's everything they previewed in Nova. And first, we have to wade through Space Marines. We have to tell everyone that we want them to quiet down. That works. So then we get to the Tragus King. And just look at this guy in all of his glory. He is just an absolutely fabulous model. The amount of care and detail that went into highlighting his little booty here is so impressive. The concept that he's so big that some ancient civilization started building on top of him while he was asleep doesn't totally fit with me when you look at some of the pictures that he's in for scale. Um, a human goes up to, is pretty tall on him, probably goes up to his waist. That felt a little odd as something they were trying to sell, but otherwise, as a model, I think he's amazing. I love the club for the fact that it's got a fossil here. That's actually my favorite piece of the current Rocket Trogoth kit is the fact that you can make one of their clubs be like a fossil club. That's really cool. The cave paintings are cool, even though the concept that he was part of a cave that people painted in ancient times, again, doesn't really sell to me because of his size. He's quite small. He's obviously huge. He's much too big to be in Warcry, but if they're trying to sell this concept, I think he needs to be, Bergen size. And that's okay. I think as a model, I think he's really incredible, and we can just say, he picked up this piece of ancient realm gate and just stuck it on his head for fun, something like that. I think he's really amazing. I think painting him is going to be so cool. They tend to paint Tragus a little bit boring, but people can go really crazy with how you paint this guy and all the colors you can include. It's going to be really amazing, and because of all his texture, he'll take contrast paint really well. He'll take try-harding really well. There's something up with his face. I don't know. There's something about his face that really horrifies me, but that's so I guess they're supposed to be like that. So that's just fine. Then we get to Iron Jaws, and this is the thing that I'm really excited about. Uh, that's not true. There's a few things that I'm excited about, but the first is Zogrog Anvil Smasher, and I'm sad that we don't have named characters in Warcry very much. That would be one of the first things I would have done if I were GW, is I would have in introduced named characters and given them a couple different types of mechanics. Um, Passive abilities, something like that. That's something they still have in mind. But Zogrog's really cool. I love that you can either give him this sort of molten polearm, or you can give him the tongs. I think the polearm looks a lot better, but I imagine, if you paint the tongs a little differently than how they've done, he just looks very plain here. If you paint these tongs a little differently, you'll get a little more out of him, I think. Him and his little friend, the Anvil Squig, are just such a cool little group, and I think it'd be so awesome to play them in Warcry. So at the end of this video, I'm going to show you some little homebrewed rules that I came up for him. But another one that we just absolutely have to get in Warcry is these Brute Ragers. They describe them as being just more lethal, less well protected, faster brutes. And I think that's just so cool. It's absolutely something that sort of fits in the Iron Jaws range. All Iron Jaws are move 3, but there's no like real reason why they can't have extra fast one. The Gore Gruntas are quick, so having something in between brutes and Gore Gruntas on speed, I think works really well. Um, I think these weapons are cool. This jagged gore hacka, we already have a regular brute who's holding it, so you could easily just have a move 4, toughness 4 version of that brute. Everything else is the same, and the attack profile's the same, and that would be a really interesting addition to Iron Jaw's list that I think a lot of people would play. So These guys are really awesome. I think um, they're going to be for people who want to try really hard with orc skin. GW, when they do orc skin, they do a really good job with the highlighting. And actually, some of these muscles here are just the depth they got is incredible. But they avoid doing the thing that I think a lot of pro painters like to do, which is to make parts of the orc skin a little bit sort of orangish or make them feel a little bit more alive. Uh, the the paint job they go for here just makes them feel really alien and kind of made out of clay, which is really cool. I think it's done certainly intentionally, but other folks, I'm excited to see what other people sort of get into with these brute ragers, and this is absolutely something that I'm going to be picking up, and probably only building one of because I'll be using the rest of the box to build these awesome weird brute rekkas. Now these are just brute ragers with a hat. As far as I can tell, that's all that's going on, and they switched which parts of the armor they painted black and which parts of the armor they painted yellow. But otherwise, these are brute ragers with hats, and they sort of have these weird magical energies that have to be controlled by weird non-shamans. I hope that that means they have absolutely wild abilities, but who knows? Um, they only work with the chain smashes. The regular brute ragers can use those too, but some range 3 Iron Jaws could be really cool. These are going to be really expensive in game, I'm sure. But yeah, if we ever get these into Warcry, I'm sure, it'll be a while. It might even be till second edition. I bet they update before then. But um, I'll just be so excited for them. I really love what's going on with the little helmets, with the wild weapon, especially this one. For some reason, this one's my favorite, where the one in the center, it just looks a little bit longer. It looks like he's more ready to actually use it. Um, this guy, he's just gonna thwack at you, and then you're gonna step aside, and then it's gonna hit the ground, and then you're just gonna stab him. But that's a tiny nitpick. Otherwise, I do really like all of them, and I think this bird helmet is really amazing. Then we have Ard Boys. I'll be honest, I love my derpy little Ard Boys, but these ones are truly excellent. They just fit so well with the current brutes. The one thing I'm worried about, there's two things actually. One is I'm worried there aren't any alternate sculpts. There weren't any alternate weapon options in the video. So if Ard Boys are only stickers and shields, that would be too bad for Iron Jaws just because you'd lose quite a bit of variety. I think that 80 point Sticka and Shield Ard Boys would still be fine for Iron Jaws. I think you'd still be doing okay. But, right now, I think there's legitimate reasons to take the big Choppa Ard Boys. There's legitimate reasons to take the Shield Ard Boys. And so it's really cool having that sort of list building variety. And so if we lose that, that would be too bad. But just on looks, these are absolutely incredible. Wow. The other thing I'm a little worried about is your your small infantry outshining in terms of looks your big infantry. Brutes look amazing, but they aren't this dynamic. I wouldn't say that they're sort of failing to hold up or anything, but these ones are more impressive. And, that might be a little awkward, but I'm sure it'll be fine because brutes are still going to be bigger than these. So that'll probably work okay. This is a really incredible, comprehensive Iron Jaws release. I can't stand when they sort of do a release for a faction and it's really just like all heroes. So here, us getting, a legitimate double box with two different types of extra brute here or units and then a refresh of Word Boys is so cool. And then of course, for AOS fans, you'll get your Battle Tome supplement, which is pretty wild. Maybe it'll give like extra things for Iron Jaws beyond just adding these war scrolls, so that's kind of cool. Next, and this is the other just massive deal because this is going to completely change how Warcry basically functions as a product, which is so cool. So first, let's take a look at the Gore Pack, I believe is their name, their Gorger Maw Pack. Four or five pretty cool gold gorgers and a terrain pit. So here's the leader. I think the leader looks amazing. Kind of silly, kind of gross, but really amazing. These guys do the thing that flesh eater courts do. In fact, I would say they look right now they look more like flesh eater courts than they do like ogre maw tribes, which is not necessarily a bad thing. FEC look cool, but um, that's just where they're at right now. But they have the thing. Some new bone splitters sculpts do this too, but the thing where you stick little accessories into your skin, oof, that is so gross. But it's, you know, it's a vibe. That is their vibe. Really well done on like the little veins here. That's so much interesting detail. These are going to be pretty crazy for people who want to try hard with their paint jobs. Um, this blindfolded one is kind of cool. They got a lot of variety into this pack for just five models. Um, the Stormcast, I think the Stormcast heroes that they did a Warcry warband of pretty cool in terms of giving it an order Gobapalooza, but they didn't really vary up their attack profiles all that much. They didn't vary up at all how much each of them cost. They're sort of all equal. Um, these guys, I'm assuming like this one's going to be a big 2-inch range guy with a lot of damage, and maybe these ones will be a little bit cheaper. The base Gorger for Ogre tribes is 195. If that's how much these cost, then they won't actually have any room for flexibility, but I imagine they'll make these a little bit cheaper and then these ones a little bit more expensive. I hope that that's what they do, but we'll see. I mean, things that astound me about these new incoming um, Warcry warbands that they give us is like there's always an incredible amount of imagination put into like a couple really cool abilities, and the profiles, the fighter profiles, always have a little bit less imagination to them than I expected we would get. So speculating on what we see here is is a fool's errand, I guess. There's a lot of really cool things they could do, but we'll see. Just wait to see what they actually do. For the meantime, I think that these are going to be really cool, painting projects. And Warband with only five models, you can kind of take your time with them a little bit more than you would otherwise. Of course, we've seen these humans before, just finally showing us how they're going to release them. Dog lovers, you know, can all get really excited about them. I'm not super into the Cities of Sigmar release, but I love that it exists. You know, I never played video games to see myself as the main character going through these adventures. Uh, my form of escapism was always more like seeing myself with all these wild friends going through these adventures. Um, in Final Fantasy X, for example, I was never that into Titus, right? Whereas I think most people, you're meant to see Titus as yourself, or at least he is the avatar for the target audience of that game. So I always thought like Orin was so cool, and Riku and Lulu were so awesome, and Waka was like my best friend, right? Um, that always sort of resonated for me more than kind of blank slate main characters. And I think that's not a crime for people who like Titus, right? I think blank slate main characters perform a real service. And I think that these Cities of Sigmar guys are just a really excellent sort of entire faction of blank slate main characters who you can project yourself onto. And, they've made body shapes and sculpts so that like literally every person is going to see them, could see themselves as one of these, heroes wandering the Gnarlwood with no powers, no extra crazy Thor powers like Stormcast have, and and just feeling themselves as the underdogs of the setting. So that's great. It's great that that exists, and it's kind of wild that it hasn't existed until now. Um, so, here we go. But this is the really big deal, and I know that it doesn't seem like it with it's just a terrain piece, right? But they're completely changing up how they sell these. I think a lot of people online had been speculating that, the lack of big versus boxes in this second season of Warcry Second Edition was meaning that, there was some sort of decline in support for the game. I would say that that's not the case at all, based on this evidence. I think that based on the evidence people had, there were reasonable reasons to be afraid. But this is such a better formula for how to support Warcry than what we had before, because those boxes once you'd bought one of them, there was no reason to buy more because your meat trees were just reskins of each other. All the meat trees were way too similar. You didn't need an extra board unless you were aspiring to be a tournament organizer. You didn't need that extra ruler, the extra dice, all that garbage. But they had to include that in there because those versus boxes looked like a starter set, so they had to be prepared for anyone to be treating one of them like a starter set, which made them really awful buys once you'd already bought one. So any Warcry fan just had no reason to get more than one out of four of those boxes. And even people who wanted to start the game, there would only ever really be one that was a good starter. And so that was just not a great situation. Right now, they have their starter set. A lot of folks maybe won't think that that starter set is actually a very good way to start the game, but that's okay. Um, and then they've got these awesome expansion sets, and I think that's amazing. So this is going to be something where if you bought Sundered Fate or Blood Hunt, those really only have about two-thirds of the terrain that you really need for a board, and that was part of why people were so cool on them, and I think part of why nobody wanted to buy them and why they didn't sell well. Here, if you bought one of those, you can buy this, and this Maw Pit is that extra terrain piece that you need to really fill out a good looking board. This is really Gerse themed, which is really awesome. So established players, this is a perfect box for you because there's not all the extra BS. It's going to be at a cheaper price point than those old versus boxes with an entire board where it's not trying to pretend to have all these meat trees that nobody wants. It's just got one really incredible terrain piece that is also, they said on stream that this is going to be a counts as for the mall pot for Ogre Law Tribes. So all of this is usable in AOS. Both the terrain piece and this warband is going to be usable in AOS for Ogre Maw tribes. So just a really brilliant, in my opinion, sort of choice for how to do this. I don't think this was on anyone's radar that they would give us these sort of little bespoke terrain pieces that just fit perfectly in our setting, but also are usable in AOS. I don't think anybody predicted that would be true. And it's just a really brilliant way to support the game going forward. I think it's amazing. And I couldn't be more excited about this. It's wonderful. Now we get to um, the Death Gorge set. This is another, I mean, it just, the hits don't stop coming. This is the new Underworlds. This will be a little annoying because I don't want to buy this whole Underworlds box because it's going to be a little expensive. But these two Underworlds warbands are incredible. Mama Slanesh on the Discord called these Mer Slanesh, and that is exactly what's going on here. So it's such a perfect fit. So my wife calls Slanesh demons the crab people or the crab demons. And because of their little lobster claws, right? So picking them to be the undersea rivals of Idoneth Deepkin, it just fits perfectly. It's the most logical outcome. And so the fact that they still have the crab motifs, but they've got, new octopus motifs as well. This little tongue or tentacle coming out of the center of a crab claw is pretty wild. And I'm really impressed. I think this is another thing that won't be too hard to paint if you don't want to try hard, which is great because Slanesh, a lot of the Slanesh stuff that's out can be kind of difficult to paint, but this is something where you could do contrast with most of this and then just pick the trim out. Like you could slap chop this and then add details later, and it would work really well, which I think is really cool. I think that's a wonderful way to build miniatures. I mean, this is just my favorite type of design that they tend to do sometimes, which is giving you just a lot of canvas for self-expression and then adding some details later that you can sort of decide on your own how hard you want to try with them, whether you want to go into super detail on every gem like they've done here, or if you want to just maybe paint them as if they're all metal, something like that. You can sort of go to your heart's desire with that, and that's really amazing. I think you could do really cool new Warcry rules for these in terms of getting them into Bladeborn and a White Dwarf, because Demons of Slaanesh really need some extra sort of curveball to them in Warcry right now, and so these could absolutely be that, and that would be really amazing. I think I would absolutely adore that. I love this one where she's got legs, but the legs are tentacles, and even as tentacles, I think they're different lengths, which is really cool. So she'd obviously be better at swimming than she is at walking around, um, but then she's got like this wizard staff, so I'm sure she's got some kind of cool abilities there. And then we finally have like our pure combat one, who's got kind of a callback to the Keeper of Secrets in terms of the way his arms have two claws and two weapons, stuff like that. This is the only one that I think will be kind of properly hard to paint, but again, that's fine. They've got these, all three of them have these sort of callbacks to Celesky and the sort of scaffolding that Syl stands on when she's on Celesky's shoulders, which fits because they're sort of connected to Celesky, and so that's really cool. Then we've got these Idoneth Deepkin fighters. We've got these Idoneth Deepkin fighters, and they are really awesome. There's is something a little bit awkward about this pose that I'm not so sure about, and the veil I'm not so sure about either. It's just like a little bit too much tactical rock for me, and the way she's like spread on it just kind of seems like she's not super I don't know. There's something a little stilted about the pose, but that's okay. Because the jellyfish are just so cool. Her staff with a seashell on it is so cool. And then of course they have this incredible pet. It's becoming a cliche that there are pets in every box, but if the pets continue to be this good, then that's totally fine, right? I think this squid is so cool. Uh, he's a little odd as a squid in that he has like two fighting tentacles, and then all these other tentacles are a little smaller, but that's okay. I think he's still really amazing. It's just, yeah, you've got the little decals here. I just love the way these things can get painted by really pro painters. My vote at Golden Demon at Adepticon last year would have been for the Dune Claw. It didn't even get commended miniature. I think they were just afraid of the memes. But I thought by far the best painted miniature there was the Dune Claw that got uh, submitted. And so, yeah, these animals, when you really go crazy for them, can be really amazing. Then we've got some cool Namarti who are, a little bit more impressive than a regular Namarti, but still like clearly on theme, which I think is great. And I think, these are certainly the coolest looking foot soldiers that they've made in Idoneth, which is great. Hopefully this is like a toughness 4 Namarti that then you can use for your Idoneth armies, which, they desperately need. Those T3 are just so tough. So if they give us sort of a toughness 4 10 wound version for, 15 more points, something like that, maybe give it a little bit more damage on the spear. Um, that would be a really great addition to Idoneth Deepkin and would let you play them in new ways that you really can't right now because of the issues with thralls getting just blown off the table in one hit every single time, which you just can't do for an 80-point fighter. So this could give really cool variety to Idoneth Deepkin and really help them out, and that would be really great to see. I don't want to have to get this box for all of these, but I mean, the art here is really incredible. You can bet I'll be using that in videos in the future. But I'm sure these will break out on eBay. Okay. One of my regrets is that I didn't get a couple of the war bands that are in these dual boxes, and then they never got broken out into their own kits. For example, Sons of Elmorn are just so expensive on the internet right now because you can only get them in this sort of double box kit that they're in. And they didn't start that expensive, which is too bad. But these are both really, really amazing, and I'm just so excited for this nautical themed Underworlds kit. And I hope we get a few other nautical warbands. That would be really amazing. And uh, i- if this is the next season of Warcry, I'm into it because that would be really cool to get some sort of fishy warbands instead of these beastie ones that we're currently getting, which I also like actually. Finally, we have a sort of Crypt Hunter for Flesh Eater Courts, sort of an alternate sculpt Crypt Hunter. I think it's pretty neat. Um, the more variety, the better. I think there's a lot of really cool sort of colors going on that you don't normally see in Flesh Eater Courts, and I think that's great. They also gave us an alternate sculpt Marathi, which I think is really excellent. I'll be honest, I think I prefer original recipe Marathi, but this one's pretty cool, and giving it sort of a different gender is really cool too. Um, the wings are just wild big. I mean, Marathi's wings are also unnecessarily large, so you're kind of stuck with it no matter what. But I guess the one really cool thing about both Marathi and Alt Sculpt Marathi is that the wings look like they could actually fly with them, which is not the case on a lot of the winged models that GW makes. So that part is pretty sweet. And yeah, I think a lot of people will be pretty excited about this one. We also, and I didn't prep this before, but we also had this Blood Bowl team, and there's some kind of wild value that you can get in Blood Bowl if you're willing to do the conversions, if you've got lots of stuff in your bits box, where, for example, the Black Orc Blood Bowl team, if you get a unit of brutes and then you get the Black Orc team, it comes with a bunch of brutes in it, but they don't have weapons, but you get way more of them. So then the Brutes kit comes with enough weapons to stick them on all of the Black Orcs from Blood Bowl. And then if you get each one, you basically get like three free Brutes if you do that. And so if you sort of want a mostly Brutes AOS army, it really behooves you to get 2 boxes of Brutes and then 2 boxes of Blood Bowl. And that gives you sort of 6 free Brutes with which is enough for an extra essentially free uh box that you didn't have to buy, things like that. That there's all sorts of value like that with Blood Bowl. And these almost all of these, if you gave them a cool weapon, could stand in as your Vamp Lord. Maybe not all of them, but all the ones with like crazy armor and helmets. The Vamp Lord is like really heavily armored. So I don't think these guys would work necessarily for it, but this one on the bottom, this one on the bottom, basically this one on the bottom too, although I don't know what I would do with that football. But these ones I think would all work really well for it. And so getting a box with multiple Vampire Lords in it for fairly cheap, these Blood Bowl boxes aren't that expensive, is a pretty nice deal. So that's okay. This guy also really cool. Could maybe even be an Arch Regent, something like that, an important Arch Regent. So as always with Blood Bowl, if you're really into converting, you can do some cool stuff with it. Otherwise, you can also just be free to ignore it, and that works too. So let's take a look. Since we will never get a actual sculpt of, or sorry, actual Warcry rules for some of these guys, let's take a look at some homebrew that I'm gonna do. I thought Zogrod was so cool. I had to immediately make homebrew cards for him. Uh, I put him at 215 points, so just below a mega boss, which is kind of my senses that's about, where he is in terms of his fighting prowess. 3-5-35 is the defensive profile of a mega boss. And then where a Mega Boss is 3 attacks, 6 strength, 4 8 damage, I thought he'd have more attacks because his weapon isn't as heavy. Neither of his weapons are as heavy, so I thought he'd be able to swing it around a little more. But you wouldn't see nearly as much damage coming out of it. Then, of course, you have to have Zonk. I wanted Zonk to be cheaper, more like a sort of chaff model, and so I gave him this 3-5-15 defensive profile. So he's going to be tough to remove, um, pretty survivable. And then I thought that he doesn't look like he moves all that well, which is why I gave him 3 movement. And I only gave him 2 attacks because like it looks like it would just be so much effort to do a big chomp for him. Uh, I sort of priced these so that they would be just below competitive play, because didn't want to do something that was really powerful. I didn't think that Zagrok would, um, that it would be good to be doing that, even if it's just like open play and narrative play. But I wanted to give him a legitimately interesting ability because, man, you know, there needs to be more stuff like this in the game. So I did an AoE buff on him because that's what they say he does in AOS. So until the end of the battle round, add 1 to the damage points allocated to enemy fighters by each hit and critical hit from melee attack actions made by friendly fighters while they're within 6 inches of this fighter. If this model, Zagrok, is within 3 inches of a fighter with the Bulwark rune mark, Zonk, add 2 damage points instead. I did this because the game really needs aggressively costed buffs that don't just benefit low attack, high damage fighters. So things like giving +1 attack, uh, Brugits, and Chaos Sorcerer Lords, things like that. And Zagrok is just perfect as a place to put this kind of buff because he's improving the weapons of his allies. So it makes sense that his allies should just do more damage when he's around. So I just thought that that was just a really perfect fit for him. I am going to be posting homebrew cards for all of the reveals for my patrons over the course of the next week. If you enjoy my content, my videos, I really hope you hit like on this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and consider joining the Patreon. I'm going to try to do more sort of cool one-off things like this in there. So you'll see homebrew for all of the Iron Jaws releases that just came out, and both of those awesome Underworlds things. And I might even do kind of a separate card for the alternate Crypt Hunter that came out. Maybe see if you can bring it into Cities of Sigmar. I think that'd be cool. Um, really excited for that. Not going to do homebrews of the new Warcry warbands, and the reason is I'm really more motivated to do homebrews now because that last January Slaves to Darkness release, if you remember, the Ogroids from that release still do not have official Warcry stats. This is almost 9 months since they were released, and we still don't have stats for them in Warcry. And they are the perfect Warcry models, right? They are literally based off of a Warcry fighter. So it just really feels like a bit of a slap in the face from GW that we don't have rules for them yet. And so if we are just knowing that we're just not going to get profiles for these things until third edition comes out in 2 years, I just feel like I want to be homebrewing these. And so I'm using sort of an algorithm that I've used to sort of evaluate models. I'm using that to kind of give them points. I'm trying to make them feel as unhomebrewed as possible by sort of basing some of the profiles on existing weapons, so that, hopefully people can credibly put these into their games. I think that Zagrok should be, good but not overpowering, and I think at 215 points, I think that that'll be true for him. He won't be quite as overpowering as a mega boss, but he'll have enough utility that you can build around him in really cool ways, and I like that. Um, so yeah, please consider joining the Patreon if you haven't. And I will be sort of creating new fighter cards over the course of the next week. Um, until then, may all your rolls be crits.